Okay, welcome everyone. A little bit of trouble with the computers as always, it seems like. I know it seems like it's been forever since I've been there already, but it's really quickly put together. I can't promise it's going to be an hour. If you got to leave, I'm sorry about that, but there's some things I really didn't want to miss. But I'm also going to, anyone that wants to see it again or anyone that knows someone that wants to see it, I'm going to be offering it during the daytime sometime throughout the week to figure out how many people want to see it. So, and is that on, they got the PowerPoint then on the computer? That way they don't have to see me. Okay, and I wrote down some notes to go with a lot of the pictures too, so you'll see me referencing this. I not only learned stuff there, but I had to re-reference it back here because it was just so much to take in. So this is the Journey to the Holy Lands. There it is. We started out with 3 nights in Bethlehem. That's me and my roommate, Benny. It's quite a trip. Some of the places we went when we were in Bethlehem were Shepherd's Field, Herodian, Jordan River, the baptism site, Jericho, Valley of the Shadow of Death, Bethlehem Olive Wood Factory, Bethlehem Bible College, and Church of the Nativity, and that's just a few of the places. There was probably well over 100 places we went in 17 days. So it explains 2,000 pictures on my one camera. But the first place is Shepherd's Field, and you can tell by the name it's what they are considering the field that the shepherds were in. And this is the chapel commemorates obviously what happened there with the angels appearing to the shepherds. And this is some of the pictures do get bigger. I wanted to keep these together though. These are both pictures of angels with the shepherds. Hope everyone can see that. Looks a little smaller than I remember. But the ceiling was made to bring to mind the light coming through the ceiling as the light of the angels when it came down. And of course, we had a group that liked to sing. And if I would have known I was going to be showing it, I would have taped the whole thing. But then we went to the Herodian. Anyone familiar with what Herodian is? Or can you tell by the name? King Herod the Great. He made a lot of things in the Holy Lands, and I didn't realize it. You're going to hear his name frequently throughout the presentation. This mountain here, he built a fortress on top of that. What's even more amazing than that is the mountain that was right next door to it. He sheared off the top of it and took all the stones over to this mountain to build. And you can tell it was literally just sheared off like he just cut it off. And we're not talking like, it's not just like a mile over. It's like probably 5-6 miles over, and he hauled all the rock over to this mountain. But this is the trudge up to the mountain. And when we get there, this is one of the first views we see. It's looking down into the fortress part of it. Another picture looking down into the fortress, just different rooms. They weren't done excavating, obviously. Just, you can tell kind of what things are when you're there. Pictures don't do it justice, but I'm going to try tonight. This is actually the weapons foundry. There was a chapel, and then there was a weapons foundry right next to it where they made all the swords, the shields, and everything like that. They had a forge in there. And this was one of your typical baths. Similar to the Jewish baths, the cleansing pools that they have. Same idea, there were steps going down into it. And this was just one of the towers. You know how fortresses have towers at the corners? This was one that was actually still standing. And it's probably, if I remember correctly, probably about 60, 70 feet of what's left of it anyhow. And then we went down into the tunnel system, and there was a complete tunnel system underneath the Herodian. Now, the Herodian was not just a fortress. Herodian was a fortress, It was a palace. It was an entertainment center. It was the whole top of the mountain. And there was tunnel systems under everything. And the reason for the tunnel systems were water. The one on the left is technically a well. They'd lower the buckets down, take the buckets to where the water was, send them back up. And the right is just a picture of part of the tunnel system. This is actually one of the cisterns. Guessing maybe 30 feet from floor to door is what that was, and probably 50 feet long, and then there were steps going down to it depending on the level of the water. And that wasn't far from where the well was. And this is actually a picture going up into the palace. We went into the fortress, into the tunnel system, and came out at the beginning of the palace. And you can take the steps up to the palace. It's probably a 5-minute walk up the steps just to get there. And this was a stadium that he built there also. A theater, sorry, not a stadium, a theater. Because I think there was like 12 rows and it goes the whole way around. And as you can read, Herod was actually buried there. That was actually his tomb. They exhumed it and everything. That's actually the sign pointing to that hole. Oops, too far. Once again, me and Benny, we went to the Israeli Jordan River baptism site, which later on you'll find out is like 15 feet away from the Jordan baptismal site. You can't cross the river there. You can't go from Israel to Jordan right there. You will be shot from the other side. Yeah, that's what I said too. I was interested in getting arrested, not shot. But we both did get baptized. I had to answer. I didn't feel the need to be rebaptized. It was a commemoration of my baptism in the Jordan River. I just thought it was just really extraordinary. Dr. Walker and Dan Masshart, who I'm not supposed to get in trouble tonight, are the ones that did that. And I did have a video of my baptism. I haven't gotten it yet. So Pastor Dale Miller, him and his wife were there. And this is actually him baptizing her. I got him going under. I didn't show him bringing her up, though, but he did bring her up. He had to, because when we got to Jordan, they took the Jordan Extension 2. They rededicated or redid their marriage vows. It was actually their anniversary. And Jericho was the next stop. Yeah, Jericho was the next stop. This was actually the sign for the restaurant. I cut that part off. Just a really cool sign. It says, "Blessed peace from the oldest city, Jericho." And if you remember, Jericho, there were no stones left, just like the temple in Jerusalem. It was completely demolished. So these are just archaeological dig sites, and they're not reconstructing, but I think they're trying to make it look a little bigger than what it was by digging down further. That's my opinion. I'm not an archaeologist, though. But the one structure that was still, not this one, just more sites. The one structure that was still there was this one right here. Kind of looks like a rock with pimples or something. That's actually a foundation, and they're thinking that that was actually Rahab's place, the only place that stayed standing. No proof of that, but one of the biggest phrases we heard all the time, if this is not Rahab's place, exactly how close are we? Well, we're at Jericho, so we're pretty close. So it's not the idea of that being the exact place, but we're actually there to see it. So they kept reminding us of that. Told them we're going to start using that in sermons too. Now, how many thought that and I'm going to raise my hand right off the bat, how many actually thought the Valley of the Shadow of Death was just something, what's the word I'm looking for? Figurative. Yeah, don't be ashamed. I always thought it was figurative. This is the Valley of the Shadow of Death. There is actually a valley. I have it here. Or I did have it here. No, I don't have it here. I wrote it somewhere else. There's a valley. If you can see, like right in the middle of the picture, it looks like there's a defect in the picture. That's actually where the valley is. And the valley is so deep and it's so narrow going up that the entire valley has never had sunlight. That's why it's called the Valley of the Shadow of Death. That was a main trade route, or main route of travel. And if you traveled by yourself, that's where the robbers hung out to beat you. So it was not a safe place to be, but it was a necessity. Now you see the clouds in the background. This is giving me the chills already, just thinking about talking about it. The clouds in the background, you see them? Not as much there. That's more off to the left, and I'll tell you why I took that one. But there, the big cloud there, we're looking at that cloud. Just out of curiosity, we turn around. We look at the sun. There's cute little clouds like that throughout the sky, but nothing in front of the sun. But the shadows are moving. Not trying to be dramatic, not pulling your leg. I'm serious. We stood there for 10 minutes watching as these shadows moved. We kept turning around thinking we'd see something in front of the sun. Wasn't there. Freaked us out when the shadow covered us. Because actually the original picture, we were in a shadow too. That was before we realized it. But this one, you hear in the Bible of the Judean wilderness and the Judean desert. It's the same place, and that's a big part of it right there. That's what it looks like. So when you hear about the Judean wilderness, they go up to the Judean wilderness, the desert. It's the same place, and that's where they're going. And it's not just a small area. It's miles and miles and miles and miles. So think about their travel routes. 1 mile of the way a bird flies from here to here is like 10 miles, so you go up and over. We figured out Jesus was really buff from all the walking he did too. Then we did go to the Bethlehem Bible College. We saw a presentation on the Israeli colonization of Palestine, a Christian perspective. Now, I'm not going to get myself in trouble. I'm just going to say, take it for what it is. That's one side of the story. But we were cultured to be able to hear their side of the story. And I also did not know that Bethlehem is completely controlled by the Palestinians with a wall around it too. So it's not what you might think it is anymore. And there is a sign at the front at the guard shack that says, "No Israelis by penalty of death." I thought I was seeing things when I first saw it. I didn't realize it was Palestinian to begin with. The olive wood factory, this is not a painting. Someone said it looked like a painting. They're actually statues that they make out of olive wood. Small figurines, small necklaces, big statues. And if you see the, looks like a trunk in the back that has the middle of it busted out, they use that for one of a kind things. And you pay a pretty penny for it, but they're worth it. The craftsmanship is awesome. The Church of the Nativity, this is in Center Square, Bethlehem. And this is pretty much where everyone says the Nativity was. Because the Church of the Nativity is actually the oldest church still used in its original form. Surrounded by the three walls of three convents. The Franciscan, the Armenian Orthodox, and the Greek Orthodox. This is the door to get in. It is a little small, but you can see it used to be bigger. They did that so that I forget which ones it were, I think it was the Franciscans, wouldn't ride their horses into the church to get to the center to feed them in the grazed area. So they lowered the doors. Welcome to Greek Orthodox. Want some gold? Looks really pretty, but I couldn't, I couldn't go to a church like that, but it does look pretty. But immediately underneath that is this. It's a cave. And in the cave are pictures like this. And that is not a rug, it's not a wallpaper, it's actually plaster, decorative plaster. And a lot of, when we get to Masada, You'll see stuff like that in the bathhouse. They actually plastered the stone to be very decorative. They wanted the best of everything. But, I mean, the walls were just lined with those pictures. This is actually where they said, where they have the manger, the nativity itself. You couldn't actually see over the gate. You just had to take their word for it. But here they built a shrine over where they said the nativity sat. And there is a rock in there. I don't know what Our guide was Arabian. He was an Arab. Sometimes it's very hard to catch him, and I had 45 people in front of me, so I didn't get the whole story on this, but if you want to read up on it, like I said, it's the Church of the Nativity, and everyone seems to be in agreement with it, so we're going to go with it. And if not, how far are we? Yeah, I love that one, though. Okay, now, when we walked into the door, we walked into the Greek Orthodox. If you take a left, I think it's the Franciscan, however you say that, to the left, and it looks like a Roman Catholic church. This is underneath that. This is actual, and they still use this too. Everything is made of stone, the tables, the benches, everything. This is what they used to worship in before they had the building above it. This is actually still used. There were 2 services going on downstairs, so we had to be quiet while we were down there. I think one of them was Roman Catholic. These are, I think there's like 24 of these upstairs in the Franciscan one, and they tell the entire story of the Holy Week. I just took 6 of them. There's Jesus carrying the cross, being stripped down, being nailed to the cross, being hung up, being taken off, and being prepared for burial. I mean, they're very detailed too. They're awesome. And if anyone wants to see them up closer, I can bring them up on my phone a little better. I don't know if this is a painting or a mosaic. Either way, it is phenomenal. It's when we walked in, we saw that gold. It's to the left of that, way up at the ceiling, so I really couldn't see. But what I did see is this part of it. That's Jesus after the resurrection, showing Thomas the spear mark in his side. And you can see the spear mark in the picture. You can see the nail marks in the picture, and you can see the nail marks in the feet. Very intricately done. Like I said, it's not a painting. Just very well done. Now, I think everyone saw this on my Facebook. I was so proud of this picture. It was full moon on the Sea of Galilee. First night in Tiberias. But while we were in Tiberias, we went to Caesarea, Mount Carmel, Tel Megiddo, Capernaum, Mount of Beatitudes, Magdala, we've cruised the Golan Heights, and Caesarea Philippi, just a couple places we went. That was, I forget, crap. Victor, thank you. Who said that? Thank you very much. I was thinking Lester. I knew it wasn't Lester. That's Victor, and of course, me and my roommate. We seem to be in a lot of pictures together. You can see we color coordinated too. But this was actually built by Herod the Great. This is another one of his accomplishments. This is the Grand Theater, the Grand Roman Theater that he built. And there are regular chairs down below. They actually use this for concerts. They have a stage at the front of it where the original stage used to be. It's not there anymore. But it looks like Hershey Park Stadium. They got a stage like that they had equipment on. But everything else except for the metal railing is original. Huh? Oh yeah, they're, did you ever see them in the Flintstones? They have pterodactyls that light them up. And this is a statue garden, a mixture of Grecian and Christian statues that they found throughout the whole area, actually. And that is another one of Herod the Great's phenomenal oopses. It's actually, he found a bunch of rocks that jut out into the water, and he put rocks on top of them, and then he built a palace on top of that. It was phenomenal. It was awesome. It was great, and it sank. Not right away. It was useful, but it did eventually sink. It's maybe about half of the height it used to be, I guess. But this is an inlet that he made, essentially, to control the port and everything. And this is actually, I know you can't read it, bad sunlight, bad pictures. This was a replica of the stone that was actually found on the property that mentions Pontius Pilate by name and title. The big idea about this is it proves Pontius Pilate. So it proves a biblical figure. And that's why that's big, that's why that's there. This is, you saw the water that was coming in. This video is really cool. I don't have it on here though. Just the water crashing against that. But to the right of that, between the theater and the palace was actually a what do they call that? A hippodrome. Horse races, chariot races, all the, the fun stuff. When they got bored with that, they started making amphitheaters. That's where the gladiators came in, the blood, the gore, when society started going downhill then. But they started out with the hippodromes, and it was just like a big old racetrack for horses and whatever. I know. It is beautiful. It's like being down in Cancun. Been there once. Oh, the Bahamas, too. Just a little far away. This is the aqueducts built by Herod the Great, of course. Water transportation system. Now, I learned a very important fact about this. Now, this is the other side of it. Why do you think there are two channels? Nah, one for hot, one for cold water. Thank you, Dr. Walker, for that one. But no, it was a double-channel aqueduct. I said, nothing spectacular about it. How it's staying together, I don't know. They didn't even use a Pennsylvania. A Keystone. Yeah, that's it. But this thing goes on for miles. My camera ain't that good. I mean, it literally just kept going. You couldn't even see the end of it. And as far as you could see, it looked like it was still buried with sand. So they hadn't even excavated it all. But yeah, just take an example. There is somebody standing there. Only goes maybe not even halfway up that hole. And then we were on to Mount Carmel. One of my favorite places. I love the story of Elijah. But the spot that we were at was actually, and I'm going to butcher this, I'm sorry if any of them are watching, Discalced Carmelite Order, the sanctuary and monastery. This is actually the second of two monasteries that they run. And if I'm not mistaken, if I've done my research properly, the first one is attributed to be started by Mother Teresa. Somehow, and I didn't get that far into reading it or into researching it, Elijah is a main figure in their history, in their workings, which is why they have a monastery right there on the Mount of, Mount Carmel. A lot of mounts. But here's the monastery, and then we actually were up on the roof then. But before we got up there were three of these pictures carved in stone. This is the prophets of Baal. Begging and pleading, cutting themselves, burn our sacrifice, burn our sacrifice. This is Elijah going, all right, God, let's go. Boom, it's on fire. You can actually see the flames coming up off the altar. Here's the prophets of Baal being slaughtered. Yeah, it's very detailed. I was just like, whoa, they actually did that? I know they did it, but I can't believe they actually depicted it. But I guess that was before political correctness. This is up on top of the monastery, and that is looking out over Mount Carmel. obviously it's more than Mount Carmel. It's just, that is the terrain. The terrain just got me. Every time I looked, the terrain got me. And then you turn around and look off the other side of the building, and this is the Jezreel Valley. And if you're not familiar with what the Jezreel Valley has to do with anything really, Tel Megiddo and the Jezreel Valley, from Revelations chapter 16, verses 12 through 16, the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up to prepare the way for the kings from the east. Going to skip down. They were demonic spirits that perform signs, and they go out to all the kings of the whole world to gather them for the battle on the great day of God Almighty. Then they gathered the kings together, and the place that in Hebrew is called Armageddon. Now the word Armageddon ultimately comes from the Hebrew word Harmageddon, which means Mount Megiddo. And Tel Megiddo, Tel means hill. So Tel Megiddo is in Revelations. And the Jezreel Valley is right next to it. And the Jezreel Valley is actually, well, it's actually very busy right now too, but it was always a busy. Tel Megiddo was actually the place everyone wanted to own because they could rob whoever came by them. And you couldn't attack it. But you could. Egypt actually tried and wound up failing. But anyone that was in my Abraham Bible study, I know this isn't Abraham, but this is one of my, oh my goodness, I get it now. This is the gate system to the city, to Tel Megiddo. This is a 4-gate system. They have 2s, 3s, and 4 gates. Gate 1 is up. The rest of them are down. There are elders that sit in those cubby holes. There's little benches in there. When people come into the town, they go up to the elders, and the elders are like, "Why are you here?" And they play truth or dare with them. Are you for real or not? If you remember from the Abraham Bible study, we had a discussion as to why Lot was sitting out in front of the city. I think we came up with a bunch of answers. He didn't want to be in there with them. They didn't want him in there. Some people said he was a judge. Some people said he was the mayor. I had researched it. It still didn't stick. That's where he was sitting. He was sitting at the front of the city at the gate as one of the elders. So that was just one of those, oh my gosh, it makes sense now. And it wasn't even the city that he was at, obviously. I didn't even hear you anymore. And if you, the line right there, the brown line, below is original, above is reconstructed. Anytime you see brown or a black line, they do that to show you what's original and what's not. This is just more parts of Tel Megiddo. Tel Megiddo, and I'm going to get called on this. The number 30 sticks out in my mind. I think it was rebuilt on like 20 to 30 times. Every time somebody would take it over, they'd flatten it out and build on top of it. They wouldn't use the existing structures. They would build on top of it. And one of the places you can see that is right here. You got 3 different types of building construction. That's 3 different owners of Tel Megiddo. You got the small stones, you got the fill. That might just be the fill. It might be 2 owners. But then you got the blocks. So as time progressed, the blocks got bigger, obviously. This is looking down to some of the other smaller stuff. That's how high they were built up. So that was like original right there. Talk about renovations. And this was a silo. This was a late century silo, but this was like for feeding the animals and stuff. It was dug straight down. There was a ramp to go the whole way down to it, so if it got empty, I'm not even going to guess how deep it was. I just would have taken a while to get down there, though. It's deeper than the cistern that was in the Herodian. And this is looking down into, you see the third thing we went to was the water system. It's kind of just a real simple place, but it was made so that the people didn't have to leave the city walls to get water. It was a tunnel system that we had to take 182 steps down to get to the tunnel. And then it was 80 steps to get back up because it was lower where you came out. but the water was in there, so they never actually had to leave the town to get down there. This is looking down through the center of the stairs that we had to go down. And then once we got down there, this was the tunnel that shot straight out to the other end. And they obviously didn't have the planks. They had to walk through the water. And then this is the way coming back up. And this would have all been covered with shrubbery, so they would have been protected while they were in there. Nobody could have found the exit. But if they had to leave quick, that was their exit out. And then we come to Capernaum. And this is actually just a general idea of what the houses looked like, the living accommodations. And this was a late 4th century AD white synagogue that was built on the remains of the synagogue of Jesus. I'm not familiar which synagogue they're talking, obviously the synagogue at Capernaum from Jesus' time, but this was built on top of that. Nice way, and they are really tall, unlike, these are just the small inner ones. And this was actually Peter's mother-in-law's house. Threw me off because the sign says home of Peter. It wasn't Peter's home, it was his mother-in-law's house. And if you can see, right here, there's like a slit in the wall. Well, they put like a, does anyone remember the Gravitron ride that sticks you to the wall when it spins around really fast? They put a church on top of her house that looks like that. So that's what's above the house. And you really can't get it to underneath it, but within that circle, there's actually still original plaster from when she lived there. Or that's what they're dating it as. It was still there when they dug it up, so. And then we're off to the Mount of Beatitudes. This stuff's actually, if you're in a vehicle, it's not that far away. But you're talking miles and miles and miles to get from one place to the other. And walking. But this one is, let anyone who thirsts come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as Scripture said, rivers of living water flow from within him. John 7:37. They had a bunch of them sitting around. They had the Beatitudes up there. This was a chapel that was built there to commemorate the Sermon on the Mount up there. This was one of the windows, and nice thing about Google is Google translates for you. Most of it anyhow. I'm not going to try to read the left one, but the right one is, blessed are the miserable. And then it says, chords, I don't know what the rest of it is. But the main gist of that one is, that's the blessed are the miserable. Sometime prior to us being there, they had a fire coming up the side of the mountain. That's why the pine trees are brown. They went woof, but they're actually coming back now. And you see the pine trees there too. They took a nice beating. Now I had these out of order. The one on the right. Does anyone know the difference between the Sermon on the Mount and the Sermon on the Plains? Smart aleck. That would have been my answer. I did not know the difference. I'm ashamed to say, kind of. Where is that? I'm doing this without notes. Okay, the Sermon on the Mount was the one that included the 9 Beatitudes in Matthew 5. That's the one that everyone's mostly familiar with. Now, we also know the other one, but we don't know it as the Sermon on the Plains. It's the one from Luke 6, where there's 4 Beatitudes and 4 woes. It's like one of those, blessed is the poor, and then woe to the rich. It was for 2 totally different audiences, and that's why it is that way. Now, the right is looking down onto the Sea of Galilee from the Mount of Beatitudes. Right at the end of the green, it actually drops down to water level. And it's like a big amphitheater. And they said that they actually did tests where if Jesus would have stood at the water of the Sea of Galilee, they could have heard him through the whole valley without him hollering, just because of the natural acoustics. That's God for you, setting up an amphitheater for him to preach. It's the only explanation. But it looks like a big amphitheater, just the way the hills are. They're all even. It's like it was made that way, but God made it that way. And then we were off to Tabgha. The verse I have up there is Mark 6:37-44. It is the feeding of the 5,000. This is a place that is attributed with the feeding of the 5,000. Of course, there's a chapel. They built a chapel everywhere. Chapels, synagogues, Roman Catholic churches. You'll see one of them for Mary later on. The cool thing about this is right in the middle, I couldn't get a good picture because they had it roped off. But there's actually a picture there of a loaf of bread and 2 fish. So, it was just really cool, so I took the picture. Outside is actually an olive press. I was really impressed by this. I was like, what's a big rock doing there? They said, they put a log through, or put a wood through there and went around and crushed all the olives, got the olive oil. Yeah. Try pushing that thing by yourself. Primacy of Peter. Peter, do you love me? Now, seriously, Peter, do you love me? Okay, let's try this again. Do you love me, Peter? Yes. Okay, then take care of my sheep. This is, of course, a church built on the spot that they're saying this is where Peter came in. And, it's right on the Sea of Galilee. That's apparently where Peter came in. Or he swam in, actually, beat the boat there. And that's where him and Jesus had their conversation about it. I forget what mountain that is. They did tell me, and I don't even want to take a guess at it. I'm just going to say it's a beautiful mountain. But that's, as you're looking out across the Sea of Galilee from the primacy of Peter, that's one of the views you see. And then inside the chapel, it's very simple, actually. It's nice and simple, nothing gaudy. And there was actually, it is a monastery of sorts because there's a monk that works there who had an iPhone. That's something to see, monk sitting there texting. No, he wasn't. We saw more than one of them, too. There was a bunch of them. Magdala. This was actually one of the places we weren't going to go, but we requested it. It was the home of Mary Magdalene. And what you see here is actually the first synagogue they dug up in Magdala. The land was bought by a priest. He was going to build a resort. Lo and behold, he couldn't start the resort because they started finding stuff like this. I actually got this off the internet, but it's from there. I didn't actually see it. It's in a museum now. But it's the first known representation of the temple in Jerusalem with the menorah on it. But that's why they had to stop digging, and it was immense. It really was. And then Magdala was actually a fishing town. And you see some of the look like dividers. Some of those are actually places to bring the fish and keep the live fish in. And then they sell them at market. That's basically an open air market right there. No COVID coming from there, though. Sorry. This is another chapel that was for commemoration of Mary Magdalene. I think there were 12 pillars. They also had the 12 apostles. Disciples, apostles. This was the Thomas? Yeah, that's Thomas. They actually had one of those. I'm going to look real stupid. Who betrayed Jesus? Judas Iscariot. They had one of Judas Iscariot too, so they had the original 12 apostles. They had pictures of all of them. So this is why I write notes. And then there's pictures. Each of these, it's like little chapels inside the big chapel. There's pictures, and then at the end of, I don't know what writing it is, there's a verse also. The verse that's written on this one is Luke 8:2. This is where Jesus, he's with Mary Magdalene. She's in the picture too. It's really hard to see. This one might be a little easier, though. Mark 5:41. That's Jesus raising Jairus' daughter back to life. Like I said, these were all little mini chapels within that big chapel, and they all had different pictures. There was one that showed from here down and a hand reaching in to touch the hem. So we know what story that is, too, tied with Jairus, obviously. Now, the Valley of the Doves. This was really interesting because I didn't get the pic. Oh, I did get a picture, but I didn't add it. Before you get to the Valley of the Doves, when you're going from Magdala to the valley, there's where a mountain comes out. Mountain range comes out to a peak, and it looks like woodpeckers just destroyed the whole face of it. That's actually where the zealots hid from Herod when he was chasing him. I don't know how they got there, because the only way that Herod could actually get to them was to lower his army from baskets from the top to get to the caves. So how the zealots got in there to begin with, I don't know. But they actually used it to rob people also. They'd come out of the holes and rob people as they were walking by. Because the Valley of the Doves, right around the corner, was it connected Nazareth to Magdala. It was like a main thoroughfare. And Jesus used it to get to Capernaum. But this is actually in the Valley of the Doves, around the corner. I just got lucky with the sunlight on that one. That's beautiful. But you can see, hopefully you can see the holes. There's some that are trees, there's some holes. But this is where the Magdala Jews hid during the persecution also. They hid in these holes. So it wasn't just the zealots around the edge. They used the same thing. And I know it's really hard to see a bad picture to begin with, but there were actually buildings built there too. After, that's not where they hid. They hid up in the holes, like up above that house. But then there were houses built right into the wood, or right into the rock also. It's a really cool landscape, like I said. You never know what you're going to walk into. And then we went to Bethsaida. John 1:44 makes it the hometown of Peter, Andrew, and Philip. And Bethsaida was a fishing town as well. Obviously, that tells you that's the outer wall. That was one of the outer walls to the city. That was the gate to the city. I'm fascinated with the gates, now that I know what they're for. That's not me. God's telling me I was wrong. And this is just a basic structure of a house. You can see it drops down in different rooms of the house. I forget if this was the fisherman's house or the wine grower's house, but they had signs for both, but it was one of them. And then there was also a religious site also. Tel Dan was where we went next. Now, there's two important things about Tel Dan. Tel Dan itself is at the base of Mount Hermon. The one on the left is the River Dan. It comes off the mountain, and it's the largest of three tributaries that feed into the Jordan River. And then there's the City Dan, and that is actually the Abraham Gate. They believe that gate is old enough that it was there when Abraham was walking. It is immense. It is just, you can't see the proportion. I was standing back probably a good 100 yards. But it is immense. I don't know how they opened the door, but these are just walls to, the Abraham Gate was down here. We went the whole way up and around. And this is what was up at the other end. These are just the walls, different structures. And this is, I shouldn't have put this in there, but remind me, it's the story of Jeroboam, where the Jews that lived there, he didn't want them going to Jerusalem because he was afraid they'd join up with Rehoboam again and turn against him and come back and kill him. So he made altars. Now, this ain't the actual altar. That's the size of what it would have been. But that's actually where the altar would have been. They put golden calves there and said, it's okay, you don't have to go to Jerusalem. You can just stay here and do it. This is legit. And they listened to him. There was actually two places. If I'd read through that, there's two places he made them, but that's so that they wouldn't have to go back to Jerusalem, or they wouldn't feel the need to, I guess. What did I do? Oh, there it is. Okay, Caesarea Philippi. Now this one I am going to read. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" This is where Simon actually gets it right. Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by the Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome." Now, you know what's so significant about the discussion going on here? There's the gate of Hades. Caesarea Philippi was created, built, whatever, by Herod the Great's son Philip. He wanted his own Caesarea, but he wanted it to be named after him, so it's Caesarea Philippi. There are numerous excuse me, worship temples. This one was the temple to the dancing goat. I believe this one was just part of the temple of Pan, who was another god. Basically, you could come from anywhere in the known world and you would have a temple for your god there that you could worship. It was a complete pagan place. And this is where Jesus brought his disciples to say, "Who do they say I am? In the midst of all these gods, who do they say I am?" And then makes the comment about the gates of Hades. That cavern was so deep, they thought it was the opening to hell, which is why it was named that. Why Jesus said the gates of Hades will not overcome. Yeah, it was just another, I forget which, I think that was Zeus's palace. Church of the Annunciation, or Mary's house. This is where they say the angel Gabriel came to her and said, "You're pregnant, or you're going to be." I had a really good video of the bells. We just happened to be there when the bells were going off, and it was just like watching the Hunchback of Notre Dame. All the bells just going off. It was really loud, though. But this place was just like Mary, 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 Mary everywhere. You hardly saw Jesus anywhere. Everything was Mary. They had every country in the world that you could think of send them their picture of Mary. So there are walls and walls and walls of just art of Mary. I think there might be a Jesus somewhere on that wall, but I'm not sure. But this is looking down into one of the sanctuaries, and where those people are looking are down into Mary's house. So they built the church on top of her house, but they kind of divided it up. This is what it looks like when you put your phone inside the gate and take a picture of inside and try not to drop your phone. Because then, of course, I would have had to scale it and get it out. But that's part of Mary's house, and then the rest of it is outside. This is outside under the terrace. They're still excavating that, though. She had a big house, let me tell you. Because that was a large church to begin with. Jacob's Well. I love Jacob's Well. Jacob's Well, this is actually Jacob's Well, too. I mean, they know it is. The well still works. We actually used it. I got a little thing of water from it. The guy put it in a little crock. It was really cool. I think they upgraded the bucket, though. That's the bucket we used. I'm not sure they had stainless steel buckets back then. I could be wrong. Oh, Dan, if you're watching, that was you working the bucket, by the way. And these pictures were all through the church, and what's really cool is it's not just one subject. Obviously, Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well. Who's the one on the right? Elijah being fed by ravens. Here's an easy one. Anyone that was in my Bible study. That's Abram and Sarai and the three visitors before they went down to destroy Sodom. When he served them a meal, that's the three visitors, and I'm assuming the middle one would be Jesus, just assuming that. But then that's Abraham on the left and Sarai on the right, and that's when they're talking to him, and he's saying about, by this time next year, blah, 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 and Sarah laughs. This, I don't know what it is. It was just really cool, so I added the picture. This was on the ceiling. This is just the artwork in there. I should have got a picture of the old guy sitting there, too, but actually I did. I just didn't include it. Then we went to Jerusalem. This was a hoot. I love Jerusalem. I love the whole place, but when we were in Jerusalem, we went to the Mount of Olives. The downside of the Mount of Olives is that's where they took our group picture. So we got off the bus, we posed for a picture, and then we continued on. So we were there, but we didn't see anything. Except we got good views of, that's where the front picture came from of Jerusalem. Good view of old Jerusalem. But we went to Mount of Olives, Garden of Gethsemane, Caiaphas' house, the Western Wall, Masada and Gedi, Qumran, City of David, Pool of Siloam and Pool of Bethesda, Golgotha and the Garden Tomb, and the Via Dolorosa. Just to name a few places. That's not our nightly excursions into the city either. So this is from the Mount of Olives. That's about the best we got to do there. To in the garden. So this is the Garden of Gethsemane. I got to do my devotional in the Garden of Gethsemane. That was just chilling. I loved it. I think I bombed, but everyone said it was good. Just, walking through the garden, just trees all over the place. This tree here, this is amazing. I did not know this. I do now. There's a gate around it because of the significance of this tree. This tree, by a professional arborist or whoever ages trees, is at least 1,500 years old. Now, the reason they say at least, you see all the old branches sprouting out, right? When an olive tree doesn't just die, those old branches will eventually fall off. There's new shoots coming up through the middle. So an olive tree keeps regenerating itself. It never dies. When these are getting too old, it's got them coming right up through the middle. So that is at least 1,500 years old. So if it wasn't there when Jesus was there, probably wasn't too long after he was there. Caiaphas' house. Caiaphas was the chief priest, thank you. Chief priest that tried Jesus with the other religious leaders. How many people have dungeons in their house? This is in his basement. I know it's hard to see. They had plexiglass up to keep us from going into the dungeon, which I guess they knew I was coming. Me and Dan and Benny, anyhow. And what I have circled here is on the rock face, they actually have it cut out like you'd hold onto a handle. That's where they tied the rope to tie the people up to the rocks. They didn't, if they could run chains through there, run rope through there, but they were all over the rocks. They just had them cut in everywhere to keep the people where they wanted them. And here's another part of the dungeon room. This must have been low security because there was no plexiglass in front of it. We actually got to go in there. These are the steps that they would have that they did drag Jesus up to get him up to the top of Caiaphas' house. Because he would have been coming from Jerusalem bringing him up. Garden of Gethsemane and bringing him up. But they have it blocked off, except for the top 6 steps. Well, we all took our turns standing at that step and taking a picture of our feet. Say, we stood where Jesus was drugged. Not that it's a happy time, but turns out it is eventually. Oh, and there's debate as to whether this is Caiaphas' house or it's not immaculate enough. Well, I got pictures of a wine press literally in his backyard. Humongous wine press that could have only been owned by a high priest. It was just an extraordinary feat of mechanics and would have taken a lot of people to run. Old Jerusalem. outer wall, building inside. The architecture in this city is phenomenal. I think I almost blew my camera up in this city. This is the western wall. And yes, that is me with my beanie praying. So hopefully Patty's watching. I did have it on, you see, and I did back away from the wall. And I was the only one in the group that did that. Nobody else knew to do that. So thank you, Patty. I didn't get shot. This picture is not for the sign. This picture is for the rocks behind it. Wasn't thinking of using it for this, but this is the temple that was destroyed in 70 A.D. Obviously not the picture on the right, because there's rocks on top of rocks, and there were no rocks left on top of each other when the temple fell. But the picture on the right is buildings that were on the left of the temple. They're not temple buildings, but just ruins. I'm a geek for ruins. I like pictures of them. This is the teaching steps on the left where Jesus would have taught when he was 12 years old. These are the steps going up to the main synagogue that he would have preached at, that he was teaching them. He was schooling them. And, of course, me and Benny again. And this is, our tour guide never said Jesus stood here, Jesus walked here. He never said that, except for this picture. This was a large stone, and the wall behind us used to be opened. And behind that wall is one of the cleansing pools that Jesus would have bathed in to get into the synagogue, because they had to clean themselves before they went into the synagogue. Well, the wall was closed off later on. I forget who closed it off. And then they, smoothed the platform out. But they're saying that's one of the stones, so of course we had to get a picture there too. But that is the only place he said that. In case we did get in trouble, it's always nice to have the military police on your side, right? The one on the left, the gentleman, he was 19. The one on the right, she was 21. The one in the middle either didn't speak or didn't want to speak to us. Not sure which. But she didn't shoot us, so that's good. We were talking to them for like 15 minutes. And after we got our pictures and we went to walk away, all of a sudden everyone else, hey, can we get a picture with you? Sorry guys. Didn't mean to start anything. But this was one of our nightly excursions into the city. We went in, I think we were there for 5 days. We went into the city every night. And these are the streets that the tour guide would not have taken us on. I'm not sure. We should have been on that one on the right, but it went from there to a really dark alley. But we had to find our way back out, so. But it's just the architecture in the city is just phenomenal. Like the one on the left, it's so high and it's decorations everywhere. And a lot of the shops in the city, you look in the door where they're building a shop, and you can tell they've had to excavate the whole area because it's all original in there. And then we went to Masada, which is the middle mountain standing on its own. And Masada, of course, built by Herod the Great, was a major fortress that the Jews tried to use to protect themselves from Rome in one of the last wuhas. And Rome actually, now the top of Masada, I believe is 1,400 feet above ground level. The Romans, in the time span of 4 to 7 months, built an earth ramp up high enough and then took a battering ram up and busted through the wall of the city, or of the fortress. They did that in 4 to 7 months, somewhere around there. And there's actually pictures of their encampments, how large their encampments were. But when they got there, all the Jews were dead. They would have rather died than get captured. And it was only unfortunate for one person because they killed each other, but then they left one that had to commit suicide. So I don't know who drew the short straw on that one, but that's how they didn't want to be captured. 2 ways to get up there: cable car, which we took. I was adventurous, but we didn't have enough time. And the snake route. You can see the white snake route that goes up. I actually have the 1,150-foot climb. The snake trail itself is 1.5 miles till you do all the swerving and everything, but you're climbing 1,150 feet. The next one is, this is a replica of Herod's palace system coming down the back of the mountain. This is a picture of what was left of it, looking out the back. I mean, it was just, you looked at it, you go, what's that? And then you saw the replica, it's like, wow. And there is another structure down below that if we would have had more time, we could have actually gotten down to it also. But the water system on this place was phenomenal. It was something I don't even think we could do today. He had cisterns everywhere. There were routes cut in the rock to run the rainwater down into the cisterns, and it was coming from the valleys in, and he had water coming from everywhere. He had aqueducts coming all through the valleys. Just some of the buildings that are remaining. I don't think you'd see, there wasn't a whole lot of black lines on this stuff. A lot of this is still original. The red line circles one of the Roman encampments, and I mean, they were all over Masada. So that's how many, figure that times probably, 100? How many Roman troops were there, and it explains why they were able to build that so quick. This was a Roman bath. Herod liked his luxuries. It was a 2-layer bath that the posts are what the floor sat on. So you could be underneath, you could be on top, and all the water came in from the walls outside. There were little waterways that go right in. They channeled water everywhere. They probably had better water systems than we got, and they were living in a desert. Now this is actually in the bathhouse too. I was talking about the plaster. That's original plaster, because what I circled was the black line that says reconstructed original. So all that plaster is originally what was in that bath. Wanted it to look nice, and I mean it was immense too. It was ginormous. En Gedi, everyone knows what En Gedi is? Where David hid from Saul. I never realized it was so plentiful. I mean, it looks beautiful with the green there. This is what I figured. You got the caves in the wall, a few greens here and there. This is what I figured the whole area looked like. It's a desert, right? Well, now, this is what En Gedi looks like. And this was like David's backyard, technically. But there's a reason for all that green, and it's the water coming out of the rocks. It's an oasis, and that's coming right out of the mountain. I don't know if I was getting dizzy when I took this or what, but it's kind of a weird picture. I think I was just trying to look at the landscape. But yeah, so that explains, there was, all this green was just everywhere. So that's why David chose there, because there's plenty of water for his men to live. But then there's Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. Now, this is what everyone thinks of when they think of Qumran, because all those circles are just the holes that I can actually see in the mountain. But Qumran is more than just the mountains. Qumran, now the internet says in Israeli, I swear he said a Jewish encampment. There was all sorts of baths and cleansing pools and storage and houses. They spent their days down here. And then for safety, they went up here at night. And then there was this, and I know you can't see it. We barely saw it. I thought it was a stuffed animal. Whatever their version of a mountain goat is was sitting right there in that hole. And I was actually just able to see one laying against the back wall, too. And there is a hole that goes the whole way through, but I'm assuming the back of that looks just like the front of it. So we're still trying to figure out how it got in there, or how it's getting out. But I got a video of that too. He actually does move. But like I said, that's just another one of the holes that they would have hid in. Hezekiah's Tunnel. Hezekiah's Tunnel, this was our free day. Hezekiah's Tunnel started in the city of David. And it was to get water from outside the city into the city so that people, once again, wouldn't have to leave the city to get water. Now, it took us about 20 minutes to get down to the water. And then it was like a 40-minute walk through the water. Some of the areas were only this wide. It got this wide at some of the areas. But I mean, there's areas where the 4-foot people were digging. So we were walking through, and then the 7-foot guy came in and started digging, so we were able to walk through. But most of the water it started out above the knee, and then it was like mid-calf. It was really cool. And probably the best part about it we didn't know, that's looking down the tunnel some more. I didn't get a video. I was too chicken to drop my phone in it. But there is one on my Facebook page that Dan Masshart took. Just a real quick video of us going through the water. The Pool of Siloam from John 9, where Jesus healed the blind guy by spitting in the dirt, making the mud, washing his eyes, or rubbing it in his eyes, and then told him to go wash in the Pool of Siloam. This is it. This is not the original one. It's the original, but it's not the one they thought it was. They thought it was a different one, and then they actually found markings marking this as the Pool of Siloam. And this is right at the end of Hezekiah's tunnel. So I was like, we walk out, we're like, whoa, cool. Oh, and we got to walk the city wall, too. We got to walk probably half of the west wall and all of the south wall. What really stinks, though, is when you get to the Muslim mosque, you got to get off. You can't walk past the Muslim mosque on the wall. You can walk past everything else, but not the mosque. And then our last day in Jerusalem, we were at the Pool of Bethesda, which is where Jesus healed the guy that had been lame for 38 years. There were actually 5 platforms that they'd sit on, and an angel would come down and stir the water, and if they got in while it was stirring, they were healed. Well, he could never make it. You all know the story. So Jesus went up to him. He's like, hey, you want to be healed? Well, yeah, why? Well, come on, pick up your mat. Let's go. That's where that happened. A very loose interpretation of it, but I think Jesus was cool. Just another, huh? I think so. I know he was buff, like I said. The Church of Saint Anna, Mary's mom, she has her own church over there too. This is the church, and I have a video of us singing "It Is Well With My Soul," and the priest that was in there was actually going to let us sing a second song, even though it's against the rules, because we sounded like we practiced and practiced. We were singing both parts. I did not include it in the video because all you can hear is me singing. So I'm sorry you don't get to hear that. But this is what we would have looked like while we were singing. But yeah, I'm like, come on. You got to hear something. No, you can only hear me. So Herod's Antonia Fortress. This was in the city of Jerusalem. And this is where Jesus was sentenced by Pontius Pilate. The statue on the right is just one of the statues in the church. The picture on the left, I thought that was a really cool picture. I took a picture of it, then I started looking at it, and I enlarged it. That is a picture of Pontius Pilate washing his hands in that bowl. When he says, I wash my hands of this, that's what that picture's of. I just thought that was, that's how intricate their pictures are. They hit every detail. The Via Dolorosa, the steps to Calvary. The Catholics have a 14-step Via Dolorosa. At this step, Jesus fell the first time. At this step, he talked to this person. At this step, he did this. This is step 5. We actually walked the entire Via Dolorosa. Station 5 was where supposedly Simon of Cyrene was told to carry his cross for him. So you figure you got, 9 steps yet? So that's how far Simon had to carry it. But I don't know how accurate they are. That's just what they... And from the beginning, the lady that was walking up the steps, she was doing a daily Via Dolorosa. She was stopping at every station, and she was doing, what they had to do. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It was a really nice place. I'll leave it at that, kind of. This is Greek. Come on. Greek Orthodox? So I think that's what yeah. I don't know why I have trouble thinking. I wrote it down because I couldn't remember. But this is a Greek Orthodox church, in case you can't tell from the gold. This is where they say Golgotha is. And they had windows all over the building that you could look at the rock from different angles. And it was really cool. And not too far on the other side of the building was Jesus' tomb. How convenient is that, all in one building? Sorry, that's too far. The line to get into that thing would have taken 2 hours to get there. There were that many people waiting in line to go in there. I didn't get the warm and fuzzies, not saying I'm right, just saying I didn't get warm and fuzzy about it. But we did sing again. Is anyone familiar with Greek Orthodox rules in their worship places? Nobody else is allowed to worship except Greek Orthodox. Nobody's allowed to sing. Nobody's allowed to worship. Guess what we did? Because of time, I'll go on. But we had probably 30 other people, along with our 45, in a small room back behind the tomb, singing. And when we walked out and walked back around the tomb, the police were coming back to the room. The worst they would have done, we're assuming, was kicked us out, but most of us didn't know we weren't allowed to do that till then. Then we went to the garden tomb, where I still get the goosebumps when I talk about it, so you know where my heart lies. This is Golgotha, according to the garden tomb. Without all the shrubbery, you can actually see the eyes of it looked like a skull. And the Muslims turned the bottom of it into a bus station. So I was able to cut that out of the picture so you don't have to see the buses. But then you got the tomb right here. This is where you'd walk into the tomb, and in the Bible it says they stood there and peered in. They stepped in and looked. They saw the two men. They saw the linens. The thing about this is that when you step in, you have to take like 5 steps and then go into another room to see. There's 3 platforms. This platform here you could see from the doorway, though. You'd be able to see in. So biblically, this one here fits the Bible description. Plus, that was not, the man that was buried there was not the man it was made for. Because the foot was cut back into the stone by about that much. It wouldn't have been cut that way if it was for the original owner. It was actually just for the feet. Down below it was cut in further for whoever was buried there. But they're saying now, and it was a rich cemetery because, once again, there was a wine press in the middle of the cemetery. And that was only known to be in the rich areas. So, like I said, I got the warm and fuzzies. I was happy with it. But on the left side of the door, there is like a little gully that goes downhill, and that's where they would have rolled the rock down up against. So you not only would have had to roll the rock away, you would have been rolling uphill. And then we had communion. I won't make you listen to that song. We're kind of off key on that one. Then we went to Jordan. We went to Jerash, the river of Jabbok, Jordan baptismal site, Madaba, Mount Nebo, Petra. Most of those names might not be familiar because they're not really biblical. But the actual land is. I mean, you all know Mount Nebo. That's where Moses viewed the promised land. And what's really cool is, we go to Jerash first. Okay, we'll get there then. Jerash is not a biblical site, but it is amazing. When you walk through those arches and you look out over everything that's there, probably 500-600 yards in this direction, there's the highway. And you can see columns sticking up through the ground. They still hadn't even excavated back that far. Maybe quarter mile back this way, more stuff. There's so much there, and yet they uncovered so much, but there's so much more to go. Here's more that they uncovered. This is a temple of Zeus that was on the premises. Looks like Zeus got mad, cleaned house. And then there was a very large stadium. We actually got to go into the stadium, and we had some entertainment. Now, this stadium is like I was saying about the Sermon on the Plains. This is the same. There is a focal point, and they actually have the focal point marked with the stones where you would stand, and you could just talk like this, and the people all the way, and you'll see how far up the top is. They could hear you like you're standing right next to them. But this was some locals that wanted to entertain us with Yankee Doodle. Now, I was sitting about halfway up. That goes on for like 2 minutes. This is the stadium. I was sitting up at the top, almost up at the top. Well, next row down. I was too chicken to go the whole way up. So that's their entertainment area. And then this is just one of the streets. That's a normal street going through Jerash with all the pillars. Each pillar has its own style. Like each town had its own style. These are called capitals. These are actually capitals from Corinthians. This is a Corinthian capital. Not say this obviously wasn't Corinthian, but the style cap that was on there was Corinthian. And what's really cool, and I didn't put the video in, but these pillars are piece, 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 piece. And what they did is they took a spoon and stuck it in between two of them and leaned on it. And the spoon actually went like this. So the pillars that are not all one piece are constantly moving, but not falling. Try building a place like that now. And I want this for our next meeting room. This is the small theater. This is where they would have had the town meetings, the church council meetings, stuff like that. I actually wasn't even at the top of this one yet either. But that was their small theater. And that was their sewage system. They actually had a sewage system under this town. It was a tunnel system, and that's where you dump your sewer right down into the... Now, the river of Jabbok. That night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives and his 2 female servants and his 11 sons and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and the man wrestled with him till daybreak. That's where Jacob wrestled with Jesus and got the name Israel. Now, what's really cool is behind the words is we were standing there looking over the river Jabbok. That was after we left Jerash. And I mean, the whole area, I took a panoramic picture, and it's all like that. That might not actually be the exact place, but that is the river. This is Madaba. It was actually a church started by Christians in the area. This is one of the most accurate mosaic maps. They use this map. Archaeologists use this map to figure out where things are in Israel and Jordan. It has everything. And there's actually 2 fish. I took a picture of 2 fish. The one coming from the left has a smile on his face. The one coming from the right has a frown on his face because he's real close to going into the Dead Sea. So they made him upset because he's close to the Dead Sea. They didn't miss a stroke there. And this is a boat with people in it. They were not allowed to make people. They had to make them big blobs because it was too vain to make people. If they would have made them look like people, it would have been destroyed. Now, later on, they actually did get away with it. Up on Mount Nebo, there's a bunch of them where they actually had figures of people, and they're not sure how they got away with it, but they did. This is the Jordan baptismal site. And if you look at the other end of the picture, that's where we all got baptized over in Israel. And if you didn't want to get under the water, they brought the water up. And it was okay because it came from a natural source, so it was their version of holy water. It came from a natural source. Even though they brought it up there, it's still okay. Crossing the river is strictly and legally forbidden. And the military guards on the Jordan side would have made sure you adhered to that too. There was a very, very, very heavy military presence from the time. I almost didn't get into Jordan. That's the story. I was the only one in our group that had to struggle to get in. Maybe my passport didn't look like me anymore, but it took me like 15 minutes to get through security. This was a road that was going down to the baptismal site. And after we got on it, the tour guide said, hold on, do not step off the path. We are being watched, and that's all I can say. I wasn't even brave enough to step off the path. I wanted to, but I just, see what would happen, but I didn't. I stayed within the rocks. Surprised a lot of people, I'm sure. This is actually where they said Jesus was baptized. This is coming off the Jordan. It's not the traditional baptismal site, but there is the building up on in the back used to be a church, a synagogue, a smaller synagogue. There's a bunch of mosaic back there and everything, but there's a stream coming off the Jordan coming down here, and then there's that, and it continues this way and goes that way, and there's steps coming down, and they're saying that was frequently used as a baptismal site. And I didn't quite follow exactly what he was saying, but they're saying that there's proof that John the Baptist was actually in Jordan, not Israel. So he would have been doing his baptizing on the Jordan side. So, everyone has their claim to rights, I'm not going to say one person's right, one person's wrong. Just, they all have good, compelling evidence. Mount Nebo, and actually, if you take these pictures and kind of cock them like this, it is kind of like a panoramic picture. This is what Moses looked out on when he saw the Promised Land. Now, what's amazing, this is only a small portion of the Promised Land. So when it says that Moses stood on Mount Nebo and saw the Promised Land, God was giving him a vision of it. You can't possibly see the entire Promised Land from that vision, from that spot. You can only see a very small segment of it. But we actually did see the tree that's growing next to the rock that Abraham hit, or that Moses hit. Well, that's what they say anyhow. But yeah, this is looking off the back of Mount Nebo. And there's a person standing next to that rock, next to the stone. That's the size stone that would have been rolled in front of Jesus' tomb. So you not only got to push that big thing, you're pushing it uphill too. And here's some more mosaics from up in Mount Nebo. I don't think I got any of the ones with people in it. I didn't think about it. But there's hordes of mosaics up there. They have like a museum for the mosaics. And then we come to Petra. This was our last stop. And these are tombs. And if everyone can see, I don't know if you can see, there's like steps in that blocked area. Each step tells you that there's one person in that tomb. So for each step, that's one person. So that one has there's 8 or 10 people in that tomb. Here's a rich person's tomb from Petra. More decorations. They got a whole big front for preparing the body. These are 3 stones, and they were actually like here, here, and here. They're to keep evil spirits away. I didn't catch the whole gist of that either. I tried Googling it, couldn't find anything on it. But that was their version of keeping spirits away. That there was something about them had special magical property, whatever, if you put them like that. Going down into the actual cavern. This is going down into Petra. That's about, on the left-hand side, that's about what the Valley of the Shadow of Death would have looked like, only much higher. But like the ravine like that doesn't let the sunlight down, which was nice because it was 105 that day. The one on the right is a dam that was built over 2,000 years ago and is still functioning. They have not had to upgrade any of the dams that they built. And that keeps all the water, the rainwater, from rushing down in and flooding them. But yeah, they're still working 2,000 years later. On the left is their water system. It is angled perfectly to run gradually downhill, down through the whole ravine into the city. As the water comes down the rocks, it catches in there. And you'll see later on it does continue through the city as well. Now, we were told to turn around and try to see something that we couldn't see. He said, all right, now turn around. And that's what we saw. Kind of looks like gold glistening. Well, it's not really gold, but this is what we walked out to. This is what's called the Treasury. It has nothing to do with money. It was just like a government building. And if you would get up close to it and see the intricate artwork on it's amazing. We couldn't do anything like that. We wouldn't do anything like this. We wouldn't take the time to do it. But every single thing on that face has a meaning. Most of it's related to gods and stuff like that. We couldn't go in, obviously. This is another tomb. Their tombs are way up high. Now, I show you this one to show you this one. This one they're saying sank during the earthquake. That's why it's down on the ground like that. Because they know a large earthquake came through here. This is their version of a theater. Close-up view of the theater. And Petra is one of the 7 wonders of the world now, so it's really awesome to see. This is their water system. They were kind of high-tech. That's all running underground, too. And can you see the crease about halfway up the picture? That's about 40 feet up the face. That's that water trough continuing through the city. They got 40 feet up in the air and continued that trough the whole way down. And it's really hard to tell. I couldn't even tell from my picture, but there's actually temples and government buildings and homes all up there in that red circle, and some of our guys got to go up into it. I was more interested in going to the end, so I did not. But they say when you walked in, it's like you realize how small you are when you walk into it. This is just looking down across the rest of Petra. This was actually the Temple of the White Lion, or I think it was Temple of the White Lion. I have the sign on my phone, but not much left of it, but they still have excavating to do too. Now, these were the gates into the holy area back there. Now, I have the wall circled. I didn't get a close-up of it. They're freestanding, because I didn't know this at the time. There's 2 freestanding walls in the back. Now, the significance of them is everything else is leveled from the earthquake, except for those 2 walls, and obviously those things standing in the middle. They started disassembling the wall and found planks of wood in between the blocks to absorb the shock of an earthquake. That's why those walls are still standing. They weren't dumb. I mean, that's it. Sorry, I did hit an hour and a half. I apologize. And I know we kind of ran through it really quick, but it's amazing. I said, anyone that wants to see any more pictures, I have 2,000 on one phone and like 200 on the other phone. And some really pretty pictures, though. I love the lands. I got a lot of landscape pictures. I mean, just driving to the first hotel, you from the Bible, you just think it's flat land because Jesus walked from here to here. No. Maybe a tenth of the land is flat. The whole area is nothing but tourists. I mean, there's people there that still I forget what the names of the people are, but they live out in the middle of nowhere and they're shepherds. Goats, sheep, but most of them live off tourists. So, if we can all end in prayer then tonight, let everyone get out of here. That's like eating before prayer. Sorry, Linda. Most gracious and Heavenly Father, I thank you and praise you for this opportunity to share my experience that you allowed me to have through the help from everyone that's here and some people that aren't, Lord God. I just thank you and praise you for this opportunity. I thank you for the pictures and the explanations and just for everyone that showed up, Lord God. And just pray that this gave them even a little bit of a better idea of what it's like over there and maybe even interest them into going themselves, because I know I'd love to go again. I just thank you and praise you for the opportunity once again, and I pray that you'll take us home safely tonight. Just get us home and allow us to wake up again in the morning for another day of witnessing for you and spreading your word, Lord God. Pray this in the holy and precious name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. And if anyone knows of anyone that was not here because of driving, I am going to do something during the week.